Today we're going to learn how to identify different types of eukaryotic cells in the microbial world. So domain Eukarya includes the kingdoms Protista, fungi, plant, and animalia. Remember, all eukaryotic cells do have a nucleus. We're going to start off with the photosynthetic protist. Photosynthetic protists use light energy to convert carbon dioxide and water into carbohydrates, which is their sugar, it's their food, and they release oxygen to the atmosphere as a byproduct, just like plants do. Algae are going to include both microscopic unicellular and macroscopic multicellular organisms. They're classified based on their photosynthetic pigments, the structure of their cell wall, the type of storage products they have, how they move around, their mechanism of motility, and how they reproduce. Habitats include fresh and salt waters and soils. Aquatic algae are major producers of oxygen and users or absorbers of carbon dioxide. Algae often grow where other life cannot. They're usually the first to become established in barren environments. Algae can be both micro or macroscopic. They can float free or be propelled by flagella or filaments. Macroscopic algae are multicellular. They contain numerous structures for holding specific functions. They have holdfast anchors, which the organism uses to attach to a substrate. Stapes hold the blades, which are the major photosynthetic portion of the algae. That's kind of like the leaves of a plant. Gas-containing bladders to help maintain blades in the proper position for maximum sunlight. And we have red algae, green algae, brown algae, and phytoplankton and seagrasses. Plant-like protists, like algae, do have cell walls, just like plants. It's a rigid structure made mostly of cellulose. Diatoms have silicon dioxide incorporated into their cell wall, so their cell walls look glass-like when you look at them under a microscope. They have membrane-bound nucleus, including their DNA inside. They have both chloroplast and mitochondria. The chloroplast is for photosynthesis, and the mitochondria does cellular respiration to produce energy for the cell. And this is called a dinoflagellate. Algae can reproduce in a couple of different ways. Most single-celled algae reproduce through binary fission. So this is where the chromosome goes through mitosis. This is asexual reproduction. Some algae reproduce through fragmentation. This is also asexual reproduction. It's where a portion of the parent organism breaks off and forms a new organism. So the same DNA is in the new cells as was in the original. They can also undergo sexual reproduction through meiosis. Algae do not cause disease directly. Numerous algae produce toxins that are poisonous to humans. Some species, like the dinoflagellates, produce neurotoxins. The neurotoxic dinoflagellates are eaten by shellfish. The toxin accumulates in the shellfish tissue. Humans then eat the shellfish and suffer paralytic shellfish poisoning. So really, it was all because of the algae. Now we're going to look at some protozoa. Protozoa are animal-like protists, so they have characteristics similar to the animal kingdom. They're microscopic unicellular organisms. They cannot do photosynthesis, so they do not make their own food. They're heterotrophs. They reproduce mostly asexually through binary fission, and they're classified based on how they move around, their mode of locomotion. The following protozoa are human pathogens. So first we have phylum Sarcomastigophora. The subphyla Mastigophora means it moves with flagella. Examples include Giardia lamblia, which causes an infection in the small intestine, which causes diarrhea, and it's usually transmitted through contaminated water. Leishmania species causes leishmaniasis, which is a disease that's transmitted through the bite of a sandfly. Symptoms include skin sores and ulcers. Trichomonas vaginalis causes trichomoniasis, which is a curable STD that's more common in women. Symptoms include painful urination and odor. And then we have Trypanosoma brucei, which causes African trypanosomiasis. It's also called sleeping sickness, the African sleeping sickness. It uses the tsetse fly as an insect vector. Symptoms include fever, headaches, and joint pains. Once it invades the central nervous system, the brain and the spinal cord, it causes confusion and disruption of your sleep cycle, which is called a sleep sickness. It can be fatal if it's not treated. The next subphyla is Sarcodemia. These guys move using what's called pseudopodia. A pseudopod, pseudo means fake and pod means foot, so it means it's a fake foot. An example is Entamoeba histolytica, which causes amoebic dysentery. It's an illness that causes diarrhea. Our next phylum is Apicomplexa. They use flagella and pseudopods at some point in their life stages. Plasmodium species causes malaria, a mosquito-borne infectious disease that results from the multiplication of the Plasmodium parasites within the red blood cells. It causes symptoms that typically include fever and headache, and in severe cases, it can progress to coma or death. Toxoplasma gondii causes toxoplasmosis. Animals are infected by eating infected meat, by ingestion of feces of a cat that has itself recently been infected, or by transmission from mother to fetus. It causes swollen lymph nodes and muscle pains. In infants or in immunocompromised patients, it can cause brain damage. And then phylum Ciliophora, they move using cilia. Balantidium coli is the only pathogenic ciliate. Balantidiasis is a zoonotic disease and is acquired by humans via the fecal-oral route from the normal host, the pig, where in the pig it's asymptomatic. Contaminated water is the most common mechanism of transmission, and in humans it causes diarrhea. Most protozoans are free-living, found in marine, freshwater, and terrestrial habitats. They're essential decomposers. They require large amounts of moisture. They're an important part of the food chain. Protozoa eat bacteria, and they serve as food for larger species. They help maintain an ecological balance in the soil, and they're very important in sewage disposal. They result in decrease of sewage solids. Most protozoa lack a cell wall. Their shape is determined by the material beneath the plasma membrane, the cell membrane. Cell structures, they have membrane-bound nucleus and organelles. They do not have chloroplasts because they cannot do photosynthesis. They do have specialized structures for movement. So some have cilia, some have flagella, some have pseudopods. Remember, they're grouped by how they move. Their reproduction, their life cycles are pretty complex. They often require more than one habitat or more than one host. Polymorphic means the shape can change throughout their life. So poly means many, and morph means changing shape. They can exist as a tropophyte, which is the vegetative feeding form, or as a cyst, which is a resting form. Both asexual and sexual reproduction are common. Many replicate using binary fission, which is asexual, or by schizogony, which is also asexual. This is where many fissions equal a large number of parasites released into the host circulation at regular intervals. All right, next we have the fungi. Fungi are heterotrophs. They require organic compounds for energy as a carbon source. Most are aerobic, meaning they need oxygen. Large number of fungi cause disease in plants, and a few of them cause disease in humans. Fungi can be micro or macroscopic. Their cell walls consist of a carbohydrate called chitin. They do not have flagella, and classification is based on how they reproduce. Fungi require a moist environment with high humidity, so like 70% or higher. The pH range varies. Most of them grow well in slightly acidic environments, and most are aerobic. Some yeast are facultative, and some fungi are obligate anaerobes. They're found in virtually every habitat on the earth. They're mainly terrestrial. Fungal spores are found throughout the earth. Uncountable numbers of fungi spores are found in the air, which is the major cause of asthma. There are 4 phyla of fungi that you need to know. First is phylum Zygomycota. These are the common molds. Phylum Ascomycota are sac fungi, including unicellular yeast and cup fungi. Phylum Basidiomycota are club fungi, like your typical mushrooms. And phylum Deuteromycota are your imperfect fungi, which kind of don't match the other 3 groups. And an example is Penicillium. Your zygomycetes are your molds, so they're filamentous. You can see they have hyphae, and the collection of hyphae is called mycelium. So all of the little filaments here are part of its mycelium, and that's like its roots if you want to compare it to like a plant. And then these structures that pop up that go into the outside are the reproductive structures, which contain the spores, and so that's how they reproduce. Rhizopus stolonifer is a common bread mold, so that's an example of a zygomycete. Ascomycetes are sac fungi. They also include the unicellular yeast and cup fungi in this phylum. Basidiomycetes are your club fungi, so these are like your common mushrooms. Deuteromycetes are the imperfect fungi, so like I said, they're different than the other groups. This is an example of Penicillium chrysogenum that's growing on an orange. And this is actually what is used to make the antibiotic penicillin that kills bacteria. Some fungi can cause diseases in humans. Allergic reactions can result from inhaling fungal spores. You can react to the fungal toxin. Many of them have hallucinogenic properties like mushrooms. Certain species produce aflatoxins that are implicated in cancer. Mycosis are fungi that grows on or in the body, like athlete's foot, yeast infections, and thrush, which is like a yeast infection in the mouth. The economic impact, it can destroy the human food supply, so it can destroy our crops, which could cause starvation or famine. Some fungi form symbiotic relationships with other organisms. Lichens result from a relationship between a fungus and a photosynthetic organism, either a plant or an algae, which remember, algae is a plant-like protist. The relationships are mutualistic. The fungus provides protection in a growing platform, and the plant or the algae supplies nutrients from photosynthesis. Mycorrhizae symbiosis is with roots of plants. It increases the absorption property of roots and allows the plant partners to grow in drier climates. Many fungi are important commercially for economics, money. Saccharomyces, which is a yeast, is used in the production of beer, wine, and bread. Penicillium glaucum is used for blue cheese production. Antimicrobials are made from fungi. Penicillin is made by Penicillium chrysogenum. Cephalosporin is made by the Cephalosporum acremonium, and grisofulvin is made by Penicillium grisofulvin. Elimination of disease-causing fungi from commercial crops is vitally important. Fungi used in genetic and biochemical studies, like yeast, is genetically engineered to produce human insulin. All right, in the last eukaryotes we're going to go over the multicellular parasites, arthropods and helminths in the kingdom Animalia. Arthropods include insects like mosquitoes that are responsible for transmission of malaria. Fleas transmit the plague. Ticks are responsible for the transmission of Rocky Mountain spotted fever and Lyme disease. Lice are responsible for transmitting typhus and other fevers. Mites transmit scabies. Helminths include nematodes, cestodes, and trematodes. They cause disease by invading the host tissues and taking all their nutrients. Nematodes are roundworms. They're found in the phylum Nematoda. They invade the gastrointestinal tract and the bloodstream. Trichinella spiralis causes trichinosis, usually is transmitted by eating undercooked pork. It causes nausea, fever, diarrhea, and can be fatal. Cestodes are flatworms. They're in the phylum Platyhelminthes. They're commonly called tapeworms. Transmission results from consumption of uncooked pork. It invades the intestines, which steals the nutrients from the host. Trematodes are flatworms. They're in the phylum Platyhelminthes. They're commonly called flukes, like the lung fluke. They can be found discharged in waters, such as lakes and ponds. The flukes can cause most human infections. So schistosoma species is the blood fluke. Paragominius is the lung, and Clonchorus is the liver fluke.